I want to talk about another event. My name is Rodney Rouzan. Welcome back to World Wars. And I was police officer for 24 years. Of that 24 years, I think either 14 or 16 years was spent as a union rep. 2 of those was as the treasurer of the union. And during that time, I represented a lot of officers and saw a lot of situations. And this is one of the really interesting events I remember that occurred was there was a brand new sergeant, and this guy I came up with him, so I won't mention his name, but I came up with him. He's a good dude. But he was a little bit overzealous when he made sergeant. And my job when I'm on the union, I was to do whatever I was required. I did whatever I could to protect that officer. Just like a good defense attorney, I'm going to protect him. So I remember the sergeants had created this thing where there's TSA doors, right? So doors that's regulated by TSA, and they're like when you're in the terminal and you can push those doors open and then they go right to the airfield of operations. So when those doors get pushed open, they alarm if you don't swipe, because all of us used to have badges where we could go through there. Some of the airlines people had permission to go right through those doors onto the airfield. But if you don't have that access and that door opens, we used to have to be there within a certain amount of time pursuant to TSA regulations. So what our sergeants decided to start doing, they decided to start going and doing tests. So they would push open the door and then stand there and then, they would see how long the officer takes to get there. Because we used to be screwing off in the terminal, or we'd be in the black and white down the street getting a Robux, and we ain't in our terminal, but it was like either 3 or 5 minutes we got to be there. So, and they were doing that for beat integrity. They want you to stay in your area. So, and then they start calling it a response drill. So they're like, oh, this is a response. They would put it out, they would open the door, and then I think eventually they would call it a response drill. And then they would expect you to get there in so much time, right? And I don't think response drill wasn't identified in policy, so there's no real time that you have to get there for a response drill. So I remember this new sergeant at the time, he kicks open the door, and then one of my buddies is coming to the call. Not one of my buddies, but he's just one of the union members too. But he's responding to it, and he says, dude, got his coffee coming. And he gets there, and then the sergeant is standing there like, you're late for the response drill. I've been here like 10 minutes, and you're just getting here now, right? So he's going crazy with the response drill. So he actually writes him up a comment card, and he says, on such and such day and time, I conducted a response drill. And pursuant to conducting that response drill, officer yada 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 was late getting to that response drill. It took him like 10 minutes to get there, and I'm hereby writing him up. So it was a write-up basically. I think they call it the comment card. So it stays in your package like 3 years. So he gives him a comment card for that, and pretty much they serve it on him. So man, this officer's like, man, Rouzan, what am I gonna do with this? So I start taking a look at it. I'm like, dude, what is it? Because I wasn't at LAX, so I was at Van Nuys, but the officers at LAX used to call me over to help them out, right? They didn't always trust the other reps. They knew I was gonna be able to like look at it and come at it at a different angle. So I looked at it and I was like, what is a response drill? Because I don't even really know what that is. But then he explained to me. So the first thing I did a word search in the policy, in the LXPD policy. We had the LAWA admin manual, and whatever other manuals I had, I did a word search, and I said response drill, and there was no such thing in policy. So what I do is I go and try to speak to that sergeant, and what they give us basically the company response. Well, pursuant to the policy, when we give you a comment card, you can put it right in a rebuttal. So you can write like a reply to it and say, so, whatever, stand over it. Like, oh, I don't agree with it or whatever. But so just so somebody can see that in the future when they see that in your package. And I was like, nah, man, it's not that I want to reply to it. I'm like, I don't even understand what your comment, and what I said, I don't understand what your comment card says, because it doesn't make sense. I said, how can I reply to a response drill when a response drill doesn't exist in policy? And then so they was like, uh-oh, right? So then what I did is I called it taking court to the streets. So there was one of my good guy, man, one of my mentors, I call him like a mentor, man. He taught me, he called it taking court to the streets. And what it did, it mirrors the system like with the judge. Like when I want to bring a motion, I bring a motion basically asking the court to do something, and then you bring a declaration and then the supporting facts. So he basically would do the same exact thing. He would bring these, he would create these a motion, basically doing the same thing. You create a memorandum with the supporting declaration and the facts to try to prove or you're sending that to the other side. So you're basically laying it out there. And then we would do the first notice, and then oftentimes people go silent, notice of non-response, a certificate of non-response. So we're building a record on that individual. Basically, it's a estoppel. So when you have an opportunity to respond and you don't respond, so you'll get that oftentimes like from collection agencies, the IRS, they'll give you a couple of notices. They building a record on you, doom, 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 doom. Now they got that record. Now that's like an administrative record. So we did the same thing and tried to we called it taking court to the streets. So this was one of the first times when I used it, and I started writing up memorandums to that sergeant. I was like, hey, on such and such date and time, you wrote them up for this. I researched the policy. Response drill don't exist nowhere in there, but can you please provide me the section of policy where that exists? And then he went silent. Then I did a notice of non-response and a certificate of non-response. Each time when I went to him, I CC'd the lieutenant on everything, right? So I knew he was scared, so he went silent, right? Then I went to the lieutenant. I get to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant, now I'm CCing the captain, right? So they already see I'm about to go all the way up the chain. So I get to the captain, hey, the sergeant just wrote this guy for something that don't exist. We can't even respond to it. And I'm sending him a notice of non-response. And then I remember one day, he's like, they come up and tell me, I'm out in the terminal doing my foot patrol, and the LT comes out and is like, hey, Roseanne, he called me on the phone. Hey, Roseanne, I want to talk to you, man. I want to talk to you about this case. And I'm like, hey, man, I don't speak to supervisors, man. I only put it in writing, bro. Only in writing. And he's like, nah, man, you need to come to the curb and talk to me. And it's a good thing. I'm like, all right, come on down, Sarge, or LT, come on down. So he meets me at the curb, and it's funny, he's doing his shoulders like he get out the car. He lifting up his belt, and you could tell he had to suck up his pride, but it was funny. He said, hey, Roseanne, you're right, man. Response drill don't exist, man, and we're going to remove that from that officer's package. And I'm like, dang. And I knew it, and I started to see, I was like, you making the wrong arguments. You can't, like, first thing you had to see, he's writing them up for something. He's writing them up for a ghost. So if the ghost don't even, you chasing a ghost. So I'm supposed to be replying to that I responded to a response drill late when there ain't no response drill. So how you gonna write me up for a violation of responding to the response drill late when there ain't no response drill? You see what I'm saying? So like kind of like when I learned that, saw that, understood that, that was one of the interesting times. And yeah, that was the first time what we call taking court to the streets. And I had tried it at work, and I was like amazed with it. So that was an interesting situation that happened to me. So any of the police officers out there, you guys have any situations or whatever else, reach out to me. All right, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.
Words in papers, words in books, words on TV, words for books, words of comfort, words of ease, words to make the fighting cease. Eat your words, but don't go hungry. Words have always nearly hung me. Words are stupid, words are fun. Words can put you on the run. Concrete words, abstract words, words to tell you what to do. Words can put you on the run.